You're listening to the Career Jump Podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew McCaskill.
So welcome back to the Executive Career Jump Podcast. We've got Kat on today, who's an awesome guest and is going to share so much with us about mental health, her own journey, hiring and career coaching advice. So it's a tremendous episode. But as is the way during podcasting, whilst we're all in lockdown and everything, the audio on this is a little echoey at times. But I want you to bear with us on that. I still thought it was really worth publishing because there's so much value, and Kat really opens up and is very vulnerable in this episode, which we appreciate. So tuck in, let us know your feedback and enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome back to the Executive Career Jump Podcast. I'm your host and career concierge here, Andrew McCaskill. And I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by my clubhouse buddy, Kat Reid. How are you doing, Kat?
Hey, Andrew. I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
We're good. We're really, really good. I'm excited to have you on. Just for the people who don't currently follow you or haven't come across what you're doing, tell us a bit about your journey, Kat, and the type of work you get involved with.
Yeah, so I'm Kat. I'm the co-founder of Throman Reid. We are an HR and wellbeing consultancy based in Manchester. We teach businesses how to put wellness at the heart of their culture without compromising either people or profits. Generally speaking, we tend to make our clients anywhere between 21 and 38% more profitable by the initiatives that we put in place for them. And we've helped a bunch of clients grow over the last couple of months, which is really exciting, really fantastic. But more importantly, we've helped them protect the mental well-being of their people in a way that's sustainable, affordable, and makes sense for their business demographics, which is something that I'm obviously really, really super passionate about. Prior to setting up Throman Reid, I spent about over 10 years working in HR and recruitment, predominantly in the STEM sector.
Yeah, no, and that was obviously, and you do a bit of career coaching as well, I know. So
yes, I do. It's actually in light of what COVID has done to the job market. We all, like you and I both know, it's absolutely brutal out there. You focus more on the executive level. I look for people who are mid to junior career, and I help them get back into work. So we've had about 11 clients since January going through our career coaching program, and of those, 9 of them have secured full-time employment and employment offers, and the other 2 are still interviewing, but they're in a really strong position with their interviewing. And I've never taken more than 4 sessions with a client because I don't think that I don't believe in taking more than that. Anything more than that, and my method doesn't work for that person. And I've actually turned down people because their sector I don't know enough about to help them.
So you're very passionate about wellness, understandably. Tell us a little bit more about what kind of struggles you think people will be dealing with who are in transition and the types of things that they could be doing to help themselves.
Yeah, so I've actually been in their shoes before. So prior to setting up Throman Reid, I went through 2 redundancies in less than 12 months, which was incredibly difficult to go through. And I think you have to understand the human brain in terms of what makes you happy. So we do a coach on resilience a lot of the time, and there are 4 cornerstones that are the 4 C's of resilience that people need to have a good level of resilience in their psyche. So the first one is kind of control, which is how in the driver's seat somebody is. There's commitment in terms of how accountable they're holding themselves to the goals. There's challenge in terms of how they accept risk and embrace change. And the last one is confidence. And all 4 of those kind of cornerstones, those kind of pegs that hold that tent up together, whenever you're made redundant, all of them get kicked, because we as adults work more than we do anything else in our life other than sleeping, unless you have chronic sleep problems. But because our work tends to center around a huge part of our identity, we lose the ability to challenge and commit. We lose our sense of control at that point, because something that we weren't in control of, which is our job performance, gets taken away from us. And naturally, anybody who is made redundant, no matter how caring the process is, unless people are getting support with their psyche throughout, your confidence will be shattered, because it doesn't matter how good you are at your job if the business can't afford to pay your bills. That's ultimately where that comes in. But all 4 of those get an absolute kicking when it comes to being made redundant and finding yourself on the job market at any time. Finding yourself on a job market during COVID is frightening. And despite the fact that employment figures are starting to rise, I think it was last month the government reported that 11,000 people had moved back into employment in one way, shape or form. That doesn't mean that we're not still facing the greatest economic recession that we've seen from a job market perspective. And I'm Aberdonian, I've seen two recessions hitting the city that I lived in and grew up in, 2009 and 2015 when the oil market crashed. Then we see this now on national scale in 2020 and in 2021. So it's quite aggressive to have seen that. So it's a very, very difficult market, a very difficult place, and there's no nice way to put it. Everyone is going to be impacted by this in their mental health, and we see this by the amount of people who are reporting and trying to access support on our healthcare system at the moment.
100%. It's clearly going to be the next pandemic, sadly, is going to be the mental ramifications of everything that's happened.
Yeah, and we're already seeing it. So a survey done by Simply Health and CIPD released last year, I think it was something close to 250,000 managers across the United Kingdom, and 68% of them came and said, yes, people are now starting to talk to me about their mental health, and a further 9% of them said people with existing mental health conditions that they knew about were needing more and more support and more time off. In 2019, there was a figure released that recorded mental health sicknesses have cost the government a projected £38 billion to the economy. And that was actually, then they finally released more data on that. It turned out it was 9 billion sick days that had been taken that were recorded with mental health. That's not including the people who don't talk about how they feel, because as a society, we don't talk about mental health enough. We do not have the same level of care for our minds as we do for our bodies. And part of that is due to societal change taking a bit of time. We've only started protecting mental health in law since 2010. That's just a tiny amount of time for it to have gone through for us to start doing things. And we're now starting to see a level of change happening in our business culture, spurred on by the pandemic and spurred on by more people understanding, oh, everyone can get this. And we're seeing a culture of mental health first aid coming in, which is fantastic. And I have every respect for mental health first aiders because they provide an invaluable asset to that business, and they're an important part of mental wellness. But there seems to be the perception that having a mental health first aider in your business is enough. And it is not enough if we take mental health out of the equation. We talk about first aid in its entirety. You have first aiders in work. We've had them for a number of reasons, always mandated by health and safety legislation. You still don't let people get absolutely scunnered drunk in the office and run around with scissors because you try and prevent that. You do. So rather than having an intervention where somebody's run with scissors, stabbed themselves in the eyeball, and there's a first aider there making sure they don't bleed out until the ambulance gets there, you don't let them run with scissors. So that's kind of a huge part of what we do, is we look at what tools and frameworks an organisation actually has in place to look after the mental well-being of their people and move from a culture of intervention to one of prevention.
Yeah, I love that. So going back to your temp pegs then, with the C's that are pinning them up, one that I'm really interested in hearing you talk about further is the confidence one, because what I see so often, Kat, is people's confidence eludes them on the job market at the moment they need it the most.
Yes.
And you get this really horrible spiral. I call it the JABS, which is job acquisition burnout syndrome, right?
Yes.
Where you get made redundant, you have a confidence crisis, understandably.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go out and interview. Because you're not in a good place, you don't interview well, you then get some more knockbacks, which then in turn means you interview even worse the next time, and you end up in this horrible spiral. So to somebody that's in transition at the moment who's struggling with their confidence, what kind of things can they be doing to rebuild, to reset, to look after themselves?
I think they have to be aware of what burnout looks like and be aware of what that looks like. And every person is going to respond to how do I rebuild my confidence differently. Certainly what worked for me was reminding myself that despite being made redundant, nobody could take away my achievements from me. Nobody could take away what I did in those roles or how good I was at my job. And even if people turned me down, that wasn't because I wasn't good at my job. It's because actually I wasn't the right person for their organisation. So I found keeping a healthy level of perspective in there was quite helpful. I used to do a lot of self-affirmation in that I am good at my job. This is how many people I helped in my previous career. This is how much money I saved my company. These were my achievements. And I would repeat them. I would often make myself sit down and actually read through my CV and read what I had done and have that in there. Because confidence, a lot of people can't actually define confidence. It's very complicated. But confidence is the underlying self-belief in your identity and your abilities. And even though somebody's not paying you to do your job, you can have confidence and you can hold on to that very tightly, that you know what you did at that job. You know what makes you good at your job. And nobody making you redundant means that that didn't happen anymore. Those are facts and that never can be taken away from you.
Tremendous. I absolutely love that. And, I try to say to people, your job status doesn't define you. Your character and your relationships and who you are and what you're about does.
Yeah.
And you mentioned people just do tie up their identity so much in their work, don't they? And I think,
yes.
I think we're making steps and progress and people unbundling some of that, but maybe I'm guessing based on your content and the discussions that we sometimes have, not at the pace that you would like to see.
Unfortunately not. And I can get on my little soapbox and start roaring about the 80s and capitalism, and all of that sort of stuff, which is great fun, but I'm aware it makes me less fun at parties, so I try and avoid doing that as much as possible, unless I'm with like-minded people. But if we look at our society and how we've worked and how we've grown to do things, we're not taught how to be happy as children. We're taught how to achieve. We're taught how to achieve things that a system wants us to achieve. So of course, because of how we are educated, because of how we are then managed and how our performance is evaluated and assessed at work, we tie a lot of our worth, and because we get a lot of praise for being good at our jobs. So you get a lot of dopamine from doing good and for achieving what the system wants you to achieve. I'm aware that whenever I say the system wants you to achieve, it makes me sound like a radical conspiracy theorist, but it's not. It's really simple, and it is simply that. So when that is removed from you, you are losing a major source of your dopamine as an adult, which is quite complicated, and people are being a lot better and are being a bit more mindful within themselves and looking at how they make themselves happy. And certainly one of the things that when I'm coaching people through career coaching, I teach them how to have balance between doing job seeking activities and making time for the things that they love and the things that they need to do to keep themselves happy. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I need to find a job. And it's like, you don't actually need to, in the nicest way possible. You want to. The only thing you need to do in life is SES. It's sleep, eat, and.
Yep, that's very true.
So.
And whilst you are in transition, you do find yourself with more disposable time than usual to, see those people you haven't seen for a long time, spend more time with your family, learn that language you've always wished to learn. Like you can, there are opportunities to tick some of those things off the list whilst you've got that capacity and to try and reframe it.
There even little basic things. I try and tell people to make sure you can do one thing every day that you can win, to keep that going, keep that sense of achievement. So I try and say to people, have a structure that you achieve, have a routine that you achieve, keep a record of the activities that you're doing around finding a job, because that helps give you something tangible again. When the negative thoughts, I either call them thought goblins or brain weasels, depending on kind of the shape and form they take for people. But no matter what those thought goblins or brain weasels are doing to you, they're trying to distort your reality. You have a record of seeing something and doing something that you can do every day that is a win, even if it's just as simple as I got out of bed today and I showered and I cleaned my house. And I kept my house nice and I kept the environment and space that I live in nice and habitable, because I'm a human being and I deserve that. That's still a win. And you have to refocus on what victory looks like every day until you re-achieve and have little small victories that help you towards a bigger victory. And it's the best way to keep sane and keep going.
Love that. And a bit of structure sometimes as well can help. We've got people doing the fake commutes, Kat, they leave the house for an hour every morning and go for a walk and then walk back into the house in order to then start working on some stuff. And a bit of routine. But equally, if you do fall out of your routine 1 or 2 days, don't beat yourself up.
No,
I think be kind to yourself. Treat yourself like a good friend. I think we're so much better at looking after other people than ourselves, and it's sad.
Yeah, we are so much better. It's actually something my therapist said to me the last time I went through therapy around this time last year. was the kindness that I treated everyone around me was just not there for how I treated myself. I was my own worst critic, my own worst enemy. I held a lot of guilt over me, and that was guilt that had been following me for years. I'd never managed to escape. I've always been very good at holding myself accountable to things, but I'd actually gone too far, and I was holding myself accountable for things that I couldn't have been accountable for. So one of the hardest lessons I had to learn was how to be kinder to myself and how to let go of guilt and move on from that.
Yeah, really nice tip.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. Just wanted to interrupt this podcast to tell you a little bit more about our book launch. So I was really lucky to become a best-selling author recently, and we've released the Job Search Playbook, which is out there to help leaders in transition understand what they want and ultimately how to go and get it. So when we were sort of tasked with this project, my plan was always to keep the book under 100 pages and under £10 so that it was really accessible to everybody, and that anybody could buy it for someone they cared about or buy it for themselves, and within 24 to 48 hours feel like they had a renewed clarity and confidence around how to get hired. So you can find us on Amazon. That's the Job Search Playbook by Andrew McCaskill. Go and grab a copy if you haven't already. Now, back to the podcast.
You've been very open about your own battles to get on top of these things.
Yeah.
Share whatever you are comfortable sharing about your own journey, but I'm also keen to hear other things that have worked for you personally.
Yeah. So people may have seen that viral video from a year ago when I was getting ready to launch Throman Reid, where I think I'd outed myself for the first time ever. I'd never told anybody I worked with previously that I tried to commit suicide when I was 19. I never told anybody. In fact, there were friends of mine who I went to university and high school with who contacted me saying, I didn't know you were that you had done that. I hid it very, very well. I masked that incredibly well. I've had general anxiety disorder for most of my adult life, really. I've had these issues, and I've been to counselors, I've been to therapists, I've tried a bunch of different things, and unfortunately, when I was 19, I was trying to hurt myself and got some fantastic help from my healthcare practitioner at that time. Got myself back into a place, but then I just lost the ability to maintain my self-care routine as I moved into recruitment and my career in there, and my career in the corporate world. And I worked in some organizations that weren't great for my mental health at all. I had some interesting conversations with colleagues where the behavior that I was subjected to actually many times was often I got very little support from that, unfortunately. And I managed to keep myself on track, but it was only after my last redundancy that I really had it. And I think I really had to go back and get help. And one of the reasons why, again, we set up Throman Reid was because of my experience after redundancy and feeling suicidal again, and what happened to me when I went to seek help. It took me 7 weeks from start to finish to receive help from my doctors, and I had private healthcare, by the way. This is not on the NHS. There's some trusts in the NHS where it can take upwards of 7 months to get help because of how badly the system is underfunded, under-resourced, and we don't have enough support around that. And that's nothing to do with COVID. This is something that has been going on for years, by the way, years and years. So to say, oh, well, it's just because of the pandemic and more people are upset. No, the system has been broken for an incredibly long time. I've been in and out of the system for over a decade. Trust me, it's broken. I had to start my journey by phoning my GP and explaining to him that I was having suicidal thoughts. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't able to function like I could do, and I needed to see somebody quite urgently. The first thing my GP did was assign me 2 weeks worth of sleeping tablets, which I think I remember your reaction, Andrew, when you first told me that. You said, wow, that was talk about handing somebody a loaded gun. And it was. And thankfully, I didn't live alone. I had my partner there, and I had to give my partner my prescription, which still took 2 days to arrive. It's the height of the pandemic, so it had to go and be sent to a pharmacist for me to then collect, which takes 48 hours to process. I handed my tablets to my partner and told him never to tell me where they were. I could not be told where they were. And then I went through that. It finished on a Friday, so I had to then wait to the Monday to phone my doctor and go, I've slept a lot better. The bags under my eyes look fantastic now, thank you. But I still don't want to be here. How about that referral? So then A couple of days later, got my paperwork. Then I had to go to Bupa, the insurer that takes care of my private healthcare, which is from my partner's company, because I was obviously no longer employed. And thankfully, I was covered under his policy. But I then had to fight through the Bupa health insurance process to get my claim approved. They told how many sessions I could have, because they only cover you for a certain amount of sessions. Then to find a therapist who met my needs, and then to have that appointment confirmed by the therapist at a time that was mutually convenient for both of us. So start to finish 7 weeks to just get myself in front of a therapist who could start helping me unpack my baggage and take care of what was going on there. And in that time, I was a mess. I'm very grateful for my mother, who found it very difficult for her. You know, I'm her baby, and I was 350 miles away from her. She couldn't help me. My best friends were all very, very supportive. My partner, Chris, was an incredible rock for me. And then my therapist, Melanie, who changed my life. And this was the second time I've been through therapy, and this is the one that helped me. And I learned how to speak to myself in a much better way. So I no longer have to do things. There are things I want to do, or it would be my preference to do things, but I don't say things like, I need to do this, or I have to do this. I say, I want to do this right now because this is why I want to do it. So I don't put ultimatums on myself anymore, because that's the first. Putting an ultimatum of do or die, with poor wording maybe, but putting that in there was damaging to my psyche, and it's damaging to anybody's psyche. You do not have to do things, you prefer to do them, or you will do them because they are beneficial for you, because the consequence of not doing the action is unpleasant. That's how you need to start speaking to yourself, really. And I do say need, because that is the one thing that people need to start doing, is being kinder to themselves. I then also had to start addressing my guilt and what I needed to do to heal myself from my guilt that I was carrying. That was something that I'd been carrying for years. So I learned to let go of that baggage by being honest with people and no longer hiding. And I took the shame that I felt away, and I took control of my own story. And through sharing my story and talking about what I do and working in the business that I do now and helping the clients that I help and delivering for them what I deliver, that's where I refound my purpose and my power in life. And the more people talk about their own journeys with it, the easier it becomes. And the more business leaders who start engaging with any form of mental health specialist in the workplace. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I'm a bit Marmite-y. You either love me or you hate me, and that's okay. I'm cool with that. Marmite's all right, I guess. But anybody who is wanting to engage meaningfully and make that change for people, and who leads from the front, because it is a lead from the front, and who talks about these things, is a rock star, and is the person who will shape our society going forward, and who will be the change that the world out there needs to see. Because it's not just people like me, it's the people who engage people like me that are the agents of change.
I totally see that. Well, firstly, thank you for sharing so openly.
Thank you.
As you know very well, when people do share openly, you give others permission to do so. And it's a really inspiring story. Some of the key things in there, I think language is so important, and the stories that we tell ourselves is so important based on what you said.
Yeah.
And small adjustments can have a big impact based on what you said
Massively.
as well. So I think there's a lot of hope in there for anybody that is struggling. Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope in there. So thank you very much for that.
You're
What I
welcome.
also think as well is interesting is that it sounds like, so running your own business is stressful, right? That's a well-trodden path that we all know. But it sounds like you've managed, because there's a purpose that's underlying it for you, it sounds like you're managing your stress in a more healthy way as a business owner than perhaps when you were working in what would be considered less stressful environments. So what's your thoughts on that?
I think I learned what stresses me. And my biggest thing, so I talked about the 4 C's. My biggest thing for me was lack of control. So I find a great deal of comfort actually in being the one in control of how well Throman Reid does. to a degree. Naturally clients need to agree to work with us, need to engage with us on our assignments, need to either pay the consultancy fees or the retainers that we signed them up to. But it's up to me to get that message out there. And I know I'm actually quite good at that. So that degree of things in there. I'm also very fortunate that I'll speak about my partner, Chris, who is just the most incredible man. And Chris, thankfully, is in a fairly well-paying role. He's an IT project manager for Siemens. And Chris is able to take a lot of the financial burden of the house that we are in on comfortably and still live very well. So I went from earning a pretty decent salary to, when I first started off with Throman Reid, paying myself about 700 odd quid a month, which is a fairly aggressive cut to take. But because I had Chris, I was able to do that. So I've been very realistic with the financial stresses and things, because I find a great deal of comfort in numbers and data and figures. There's going to be some managers of mine being like, who is this person? What's therapy done? And rewritten her entire personality. I used to hate it. Like I used to hate it. Whereas now I find that having that absolute logical, irrefutable thing in front of me is quite helpful. So I find that all of those things are a great thing for me. My business partner, Shelby, is just the most incredible individual. She's not just the co-founder of Throman Reid, she's the co-founder of another mental health business, but this is a product. It's called Live Light, and she's founding it with a sleep doctor called Dr. Richard Prempe. And they're creating a device that's going to help people sleep better and have an app behind it that's going to really change that world. And Shelby's going to be 25 this year. Shelby's an incredible creature. So to be with her and have somebody sharing that burden with me and sharing that journey with me is an honour and a privilege. So that helps us manage our stress very, very well.
It sounds like you've got a tremendous support network, and also I'm sure you play a role for all those people as well, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I guess I'm all right.
I'm sure you're doing a good job. Well, you're paying it forward today. And it's true, the business ownership thing. I resonate with a lot with what you say, because I describe it as you feel both more vulnerable and less vulnerable at the same time, which is really weird. But there's some mixed feelings about that. So I'm conscious of time, but before we wrap the episode, is there any other nuggets of advice that you would have for, it could be wellness related, could be general job search related? What other advice would you give to somebody who finds themselves trying to navigate all this madness and get hired at the moment?
I think you need to be unafraid to go outside the box and do something a little bit differently. You need to be unafraid to ask questions. You need to be unafraid to use tools like LinkedIn or Clubhouse or things like that, where you can be speaking directly to the people who could be your future employers and asking them. I think you need to make sure you are incredibly proactive with understanding where your data is going and who's holding it and what's happening. Know your rights at all points and be unafraid to ask for updates and information, and take control back, because even though there is a degree of uncertainty whenever you're job seeking, because you're waiting for the other party to come back and employ you, you can still control how you act. That's not only important for ensuring a degree of success, it helps rebuild the cornerstones of your mental resilience and helps you rebuild yourself as a stronger individual.
Brilliant advice. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for all of that. Where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? How can they follow up after listening to this podcast?
Yeah, so people can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Kat Reid, co-founder of Throman Reid. You can also check out my website, www.thromanreid.co.uk, and book in directly to have coffee and a chat with me. I'm always happy to speak with people. And those are the kind of best methods to get in touch with me. I'm not terribly au fait with Twitter. I tend to use it to complain to public service or public transport bodies that something's not turned up on time. So don't get me there. I'm not the best person. I look a bit like a Karen when I'm on there. But you can absolutely find me on LinkedIn, or you can find me on Clubhouse. I'm generally popping in about a couple of rooms. I like being part of the Rec Club with yourself and Jim Beresford, which is great fun. So those are the kind of best places to get in touch with me.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you again for being so open. You've shared some great nuggets of advice. Please do follow up with Kat. I'm going to be working out how our businesses can align to do some work in the future, like I said at the start.
It's super exciting. The things that we can do is just incredible.
There's loads, yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited about that. And I guess the other thing to say is, if you are listening to this and you are struggling, put your hand up. You don't have to suffer in isolation. Job searching is a stressful period. I can assure you, whatever you're feeling, others are feeling the same. I know this from the communities that we run. And also a really good tip is to check whether you still qualify for your employee assistance programs, because in redundancy, a lot of employee assistance programs actually continue for a number of months after you leave the building. So check that too. So thanks once again, and we'll catch up very soon, and good luck to everybody who's listening and is currently looking to get hired. Thanks for your time.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew McCaskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.